Let's talk about adoption. We've talked about some of the numbers, market penetration. We've heard 30,000 here for these new cars, 40,000 there, but that's really a drop in the bucket in the auto market. So what are the projections? Anthony, you've looked into your crystal ball. What can we reasonably expect? And there's some wide range of estimates, but what can we reasonably expect over the next 5 or 10 years for electric cars?
So we did this, the Energy Commission was also a participant in the Plug-in Electric Vehicle Collaborative, and as part of that, they constructed a number of different scenarios. And I think it's important to call these scenarios. They're not projections, they're not forecasts. They're sort of, these are plausible futures that we could see based on what we know about market adoption and what we know about the pace of change within the transportation market. Again, just using an example of a technology most people are familiar with, hybrid vehicles that have been out in the market for 10 years now account for about 5% of the market here in California, and approximately about 1% of the total vehicle fleet. So that's
5% of sales every year, or 5%?
5% of sales annually, going up, still creeping up, which is good. And then total vehicle fleet is about 1%. We looked at I would say an optimistic scenario of potentially 1 million vehicles here in the state by 2020. And I think that is plausible, but it's very aggressive. That assumes that we sustain this positive consumer experience, that we address the challenges that exist to adoption. But I think that's a reasonable goal for California, which I think is going to be one of the leading states in adoption.
And are you counting pure electrics or also plug-in hybrids?
That's for both, plug-in hybrid electric and pure battery electric vehicles.
Diarmuid, does that sound right? A little too rosy?
It sounds very conservative to me. I mean, I started my
You're going to sell more that many your own?
I could lean further forward on that statement. I come from early in my career in marketing. I've never been, one of the things I learned there was never to be too bound by history nor too captive to market projections. I would, I'm not going to tell you what I think, because I would think all cars are going to be electric within a reasonable future, and I wouldn't put a date on that. But I would rather refer you to what some of our competitors are doing. I mean, just this week in Detroit, Ford Motor Company, Al Mulally announced, or they announced a projection, perhaps it wasn't Mulally, one of his deputies, that they believe that by 2020, 25% of all the vehicles they sell will be some variant of plug-in technology. Carlos Ghosn, CEO of Nissan Renault, has made even more aggressive projections. So I would refer people rather to those, understanding completely why Anthony's perspective is somewhat more cautious.
There also was the head of Fiat Chrysler saying, not going to be a big deal for us.
Well, you have to understand where people are coming from. I mean,
he doesn't have many to sell, is that what?
No. They've made historical investments. I mean, this effort didn't start to get to efficient vehicles. Didn't start yesterday, and it didn't start with EVs. Some of the European manufacturers have been working on clean diesel for years and have deep investments in that arena.
Right.
Even one of our partners, we sell electric powertrain components to Daimler, but they've got a very deep stake in diesel, clean diesel technology. Fiat has made significant investments in small ICE technology that's incredibly efficient. In fact, they were brought on as the partner for Chrysler with the implicit promise that they would start producing those powertrains, which they just started doing this calendar year, in the US to create a new fleet of small Chrysler branded or Fiat branded internal combustion engine vehicles. So people's projections are a creature of where they're coming from.
And Diane, your report has a range of projections from the International Energy Agency, which is quite high. I was surprised that they're the high projector, where they've traditionally been very focused on fossil fuels, but they're looking internationally. Tell us about those projections.
Right. Well, I think that international projections see more penetration in China and Europe than even the United States. And then in the United States, California will be the biggest adopter in North America, just as we've doubled the hybrid penetration for the nation at large. We'll at least do that with electric vehicles as well.
You know, I think in terms, I'm sort of with Diarmuid, obviously, in terms of expecting this to really
Go big.
in terms of the numbers to go big. But I think we have to understand that you know, car makers logically over the years have not been suggesting projections that are very high because they weren't interested in making the product. And that government, California government as well, has kind of lowballed this for a long time and has been unclear on what direction they think we should take to lower our carbon emissions, to lower the particulate emissions, to bring all the benefits that lowering our petroleum usage would bring. And I think the point that I see is that it's maybe time for us to actually make a choice, that the moment is maybe past to suggest that if we can get some slight benefits from cleaner gasoline or cleaner diesel. You know, we've been proposed many different solutions, and it's been suggested there is no silver bullet, which of course there isn't. But I think we have to make evaluations and determine whether the benefits that we can derive over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years from moving from gasoline to electricity will bring us such great benefits that in fact we ought to make a commitment over this period to solve the problem now with technology that's available.
Well, if Ford's saying 25%, that's a big number.
Absolutely.
And do you think so that the auto companies are changing their tune, that they're really, this time they're serious and earnest about electric cars rather than kind of pretend?
Absolutely. Let's be clear. The ZEV
Zero-emission vehicle.
The zero-emission vehicle mandate, you know, called for a certain number of cars, and 6,000 or 7,000 cars were produced in the 90s and up through about 2001. By April, May, June of this year, between Nissan and Chevrolet, we will have exceeded all of the requirements that the zero-emission vehicle mandate made upon the car makers. In other words, some car makers are responding, exceeding that which the state of California, the greatest pressure in this regard, had compelled them to do.
So industry is not just responding to government cattle prods, they're actually getting out there and leading and creating a market.
Yeah, but I would say that, and we're starting to make baby steps here in the U.S. and in California in the direction that Marc would have us go, which is picking a technology and running with it. But Diane mentions two markets where I think EVs are going to take off quickly, and one is Europe, and two is China, and for different but similar reasons. And that is that, you know, in Europe historically, especially coming out of World War II, they recognized in a very acute way that they had a deficit as far as available sources of oil and gasoline, and so they priced gasoline. They priced in the externalities in gasoline, and that's given the suppliers the necessary signals to make the investments in efficient vehicles. Vehicles in Europe tend to be smaller. They tend to be much more efficient in terms of miles per gallon or miles per gallon equivalent. In China, a similar situation, resource poverty with respect to oil, a rising economy and adoption of vehicles, and a policy tool, industrial policy, technology by fiat, that says there shall be EVs, and so there shall be. Marry that to an automotive industry which is increasingly global, and you see domestic OEMs, Ford, GM, and so forth, pursuing this technology with reference to the U.S. market, but because they have interests in Europe and especially in China. So I think
are U.S. companies falling behind?
I would say no, but I think American consumers are going to fall behind. I mean, there's a casual rhetorical flourish that me and some of my colleagues use that says, you know, if we're not careful in the U.S., we're going to be buying our premium vehicles from Germany, our hybrids from Japan, and our electric vehicles from China. That's a possible future. It was even more possible 2 years ago when the domestics were on their knees. But I think that there's a dawning awareness. The opportunity that's going to be lost is if these vehicles don't go on the road in the U.S. I think that we need to do a lot in terms of demand stimulus to get these vehicles on the road. One, you know, for all the reasons I mentioned with respect to attracting further investment, that's going to lead to technological improvement, that's going to lead to a reduction in cost per unit, but also for all the ancillary benefits that we care about, whether it's climate, as we're discussing here today, whether it's national security, whether it's balance of trade, or transfer of payments that go to national competitiveness.